Hi, my name is Aaron, and I did my ELI project on sustainable transportation. And I actually grew up in the LA and IE area of SoCal, which I feel like is a prime example of urban sprawl where the car is king. And so it was really refreshing coming to UCSB and seeing how many people walk, bike, and just already choose alternative forms of transportation. With an estimated 14,000 people commuting to UCSB by bike, and of course with many more walking. There is an aggressive autocentric culture that exists with this culture, pedestrians and cyclists. So this is discouraging to those who choose these eco-friendly forms of transportation. So I basically wanted to prove that the human is king and not the car, essentially advocating that this is the most efficient way of commuting rather than carbon-emitting cars. Um, and here's just some quick data from 2001, 2019, and 2022. And then you can kind of see some of the article headlines or just lines that they had in the article. And ironically, I was actually hit by a car in March of 2024. I'm okay now, thankfully. But this basically kind of just proves how underreported and severe like the data really is, and how useful it could be if it was reported correctly. So my initial plan for my SMART goal was to spread awareness about the current conditions of UCSB IV for cyclists and pedestrians. And I wanted to basically bring IV pedestrian cyclist injuries to zero as a measurable. And of course, this is still difficult to achieve just because of the lack of data that's reported. I think this was already achievable because its goals align with many of the concerns already presented by the local community, like IBCSD and the UCSB Sustainability Transportation Committee. This is realistic just because as the student and resident population continues to grow and student enrollment continues to grow, traffic is going to continue to worsen. There's going to be more people on bikes, walking, and cars basically should not be the go-to option. And I just wanted this to be impactful by the time I graduate of June 2024 or soon after, proving that the human is king and not the car. So for my initial process, I was mentored by Heather, who's the executive director of Move SB County. I also met with the State Street Master Planner of Create State, Tess Harris, Alternative Transportation Manager of Santa Barbara County, Mark Friedlander, and the General Manager of Isla Vista Community Services District, Jonathan Aboud. And as you can see on the right, I kind of did my own observations. I would do my own kind of like research. I would conduct my own observations of collision hotspots, kind of just sitting at um, intersections that I thought had high traffic, high foot traffic, high bike traffic, and of course vehicle traffic. And I kind of would see how all of this would play out together and the dynamic that it would have at an intersection like that. And because initially I wanted to install speed humps or get some sort of safety feature installed in IV, I was researching local fire codes that were relevant to getting any sort of infrastructure implemented. Here's one of the resources I use. This is bikemaps.org. This one's becoming a really big one at UC Santa Barbara for good reason. It kind of reports on collisions, hazards, anything in between for cyclists. And this is just a really useful resource for cyclists to use to look at what other people may have reported, or for cyclists themselves to report something that they think that is useful for other people to know. And you can kind of see an example right there of somebody getting the car door open as they're in the bike lane, and unfortunately a collision with that. This is the same thing, walkworldmap.org. It's essentially um, just for pedestrians. And you can kind of see an example right there that they're saying they're missing crosswalks, which makes it hard to be a pedestrian at night crossing the street. And then you can kind of see the missing amenities, incidents, or any other hazards or concerns. And I actually reported the accident that I got into on this website as well, just in case that data is useful to anybody, as the data was useful for me as I was initially planning my project. So active engagement, I started volunteering as a student consultant and a resident consultant for IVCSD's mobility plan for IV. So this was basically giving my input on any changes that they're planning on making, or any changes that they're um, kind of discussing at the moment, or just anything that was useful basically to improve conditions around IV for infrastructure, cyclists, pedestrians, and everything like that. And as I had mentioned, the UCSB Sustainability Transportation Committee, I had attended a couple of their meetings. This was really inspiring too, just to see what other people around campus, students and faculty, are kind of doing to address conditions, or anything that they're doing to improve conditions. Bike storage, it was just really inspiring and motivating seeing um, how many stakeholders are really actively engaged in improving conditions, and kind of anything of the sort with sustainable transportation in terms of like bike storage even. the AS Bike Shop, and pedestrians as well. And I had basically, well, I'm currently still gathering data, but I do have a survey that's kind of still ongoing. It's essentially basically allowing people to pose their anecdotes or any negative or positive experiences that they have commuting through IV. Hopefully, for this data to reach somewhere that can be useful to IVCSD or the UCSB Sustainability Transportation Committee, um, just to see what students say and their experiences commuting through IV and UCSB. So this is one of the questions that I was posing on my survey. Are there any instances where you have encountered an issue or experienced an accident while commuting? This one kind of speaks on the difficulties of pedestrians and cyclists at night because of the street lighting and just reckless drivers as well that are not properly stopping at stop signs. This one talks about cars getting super close to pedestrians, especially on those narrow streets that also sometimes lack sidewalks. So this kind of pushes everybody in the middle, and this kind of also creates a dangerous dynamic for both pedestrians and drivers. This was actually another collision that was reported through my survey. It was at the west edge of 67 Sueño, where a scooter made an unprotected left turn, and the driver happened to be on their phone, and unfortunately, that was an incident as well. And this one kind of talks about the collision hotspots that I was mentioning earlier, um, especially on a road like Pardal with high foot and bike traffic. So this was the Gaucho Guide to Safe Biking that I kind of was posting around SRB and the AS Bike Shop. And I'm kind of looking for other places to put this still, but hopefully this is just a useful resource for students to look at and for cyclists just to navigate current conditions rather than kind of just ignoring them and using the stereotypical uh, ways of cycling, especially in a place like IV where it's kind of really dense and a lot of going on. So my leadership experiences, especially relevant to infrastructure, this was really useful for having firsthand experience observing and collecting data on traffic and the process that goes into this before you can even enact any sort of change or even propose it, basically. So I became familiar with the slow but crucial process um, that's necessary before tangible improvements are made to existing infrastructure or installing new infrastructure as well. And through this, advocating to decision makers that prioritize eco-friendly forms of transportation, that was really useful as well. Of course, just being a leader and kind of speaking on these issues was a subject I was unfamiliar with, but I kind of gained a lot of confidence doing this and just meeting with a lot of people and networking. That was a really useful experience too. And then there's a link to my survey. It's still ongoing, but thank you guys.